Hi guys, I'm Shareya. I like to read a lot. In fact, I like to read so much that in 2021 I read 113 books. I also really like to talk about books, and that's actually why I'm here today, is to talk to you about books. Specifically, I've selected 8 adult novels that range from various types of fiction to nonfiction. And these are books that I have read and really enjoyed, and I'm hopeful that you will too. Our first book is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. It is a true crime, and it is about a case that took place over 10 years in the 1970s and 1980s. It's about a serial rapist and murderer who committed over 50 crimes during this time, in California specifically. And it resulted in mass panic and a lot of fear from Californians. 3 decades later, journalist Michelle McNamara became obsessed with trying to resolve this mystery. She started investigating the crimes of the person she dubbed the Golden State Killer. She met and interviewed victims and people who were close to the crimes. She pored over case records and anything connected to all of the crimes. And she even integrated herself deeply into the true crime community online, which is a bunch of people that come together and try to solve mysteries such as this one. And they were just as passionate as she was at trying to resolve this decades-old mystery. Unfortunately, the author Michelle McNamara died while writing this book, and she wasn't able to finish it, nor was she able to see it published, nor to see if the killer is able to come to justice. Fortunately, her husband, Patton Oswald, and 2 of her true crime aficionado friends, Paul Haynes and Billy Jensen, used her research and her material, and they actually finished the book and they got it published, and it's won a ton of awards ever since, and even had an HBO documentary series based off it. The book closes with an epilogue titled "Letter to an Old Man." I'm going to read a bit of that to you right now. One day soon, you'll hear a car pull up to your curb, an engine cut out. You'll hear footsteps coming up your walk, like they did for Edward Wayne Edwards, 29 years after he killed Timothy Hack and Kelly Drew in Sullivan, Wisconsin. Like they did for Kenneth Lee Hicks, 30 years after he killed Lori Billingsley in Aloha, Oregon. The doorbell rings. No side gates are left open. You're long past sleeping over a fence. Take one of your hyper gulping breaths. Clench your teeth. Inch timidly towards the insistent bell. This is how it ends for you. You'll be silent forever, and I'll be gone in the dark. You threatened a victim once. Open the door. Show us your face. Walk into the light. Michelle McNamara. Read I'll Be Gone in the Dark to find out if the Golden State Killer is identified and arrested, as well as how this investigation into this crime led to the death of Miss McNamara. Our next book is another work of nonfiction, but this time it's in the autobiography and memoir category. It is The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. If you don't know who Dave Grohl is, he was the drummer for the very famous band Nirvana, and he's been the frontman of the band The Foo Fighters for the past 30 years almost. Inside the book jacket is a really good description of what this book is about. I'm going to read you a little bit of that right now. Miraculously, my memory has remained relatively intact. Since I was a child, I have always measured my life in musical increments, rather than months or years. My mind faithfully relies on songs, albums, and bands to remember our particular time and place. From 70s AM radio to every microphone I've stood before, I could tell you who, what, where, and when from the first few notes of any song that has crept from a speaker to my soul, or from my soul to your speakers. Some people's reminiscence is triggered by taste, some people's by sight and smell. Mine is triggered by sound, playing like an unfinished mixtape waiting to be sent. Though I have never been one to collect stuff, I do collect moments. So in that respect, my life flashes before my eyes, and through my ears every single day. In this book, I've captured some of them as best I can. These memories from all over my life are full of music, of course, and they can be loud at times. Turn it up, listen with me. This book covers a lot of territory, including his interactions with a lot of really well-known musical influences. Some big ones that stood out were Paul McCartney and Joan Jett, who actually reads a bedtime story to Dave Grohl's children. It also includes really personal reflections on his sometimes tumultuous relationship with his father and his amazingly supportive single mother. And then there's some really rock and roll moments. One that stands out for sure is when he fell off the stage during a concert, broke his leg, proceeded to continue the entire show with his leg propped up on a chair and a doctor literally holding his ankle together while he did the entire rest of the set just as well as he would have had he not broken his leg. Another one focuses pretty heavily on his addiction to caffeine, specifically coffee. He drinks 5 pots of coffee in one day. And even though this is a story about a rock and roll legend, that seems to be his only vice. This book will make you laugh, it'll make you choke up, and it will help you feel connected to Dave Grohl on such a personal level. Moving on into the genre of horror, we have The King himself. This book is The Institute by Stephen King. Luke Ellis wakes up in his bedroom, but he instantly can tell, even though it has everything from his room, it's not actually his room. He quickly realizes that his bedroom has been replicated. He's been taken in the dead of night from his home, and he's now in what is known as the Institute. He is imprisoned there along with other children who have telekinesis or telepathic abilities, just like him. He's currently in the front half of the Institute, and he realizes that, or he learns that after you leave the front half, you go to the back half. The only thing is that when people go to the back half, they don't ever come back. And the goal is to extract these gifts from the children, to learn how to control and put telekinesis and telepathic abilities into others. And it's being spearheaded by both the US government and the very sinister Mrs. Sigsbee. Children who assist with this are actually rewarded with visits to vending machines that are full of things like cigarettes and various types of treats, while children who are resisting helping are brutally punished. Luke falls into the latter of these categories, and he decides that he's going to do whatever it takes to not only get out, but to get help for the friends that he's made in the Institute. But that's never been done before. But there's a first for everything, right? You know Stephen King, but you don't know this version of Stephen King. Venture into a different type of horror, science fiction, thriller, mystery with The Institute by Stephen King. Moving on, we have our next book by Hank Green. It is called An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. I'm gonna read you an excerpt from the very beginning. Look, I'm aware that you're here for an epic tale of intrigue and mystery and adventure and near death and actual death. But in order to get to that, unless you want to skip to chapter 13, I'm not your boss. You're going to have to deal with the fact that I, April May, in addition to being one of the most important things that has ever happened to the human race, am also a woman in her 20s who has made some mistakes. I am in the wonderful position of having you by the short hairs. I have the story, and so I get to tell it the way I want. That means you get to understand me, not just my story. So don't be surprised if there's some drama. I'm going to attempt to come at this account honestly, but I'll also admit to a significant pro-me bias. If you get anything out of this, ideally it won't be you being more or less on one side or the other, but simply understanding that I am, or at least was, human. Thus begins An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. While walking through New York City at 3 o'clock in the morning, April May finds a huge sculpture that she describes as a transformer wearing samurai armor. She immediately contacts her best friend Andy, and she asks him to come video this monstrosity that she's kind of intrigued by, and they make a recording of her interacting with what she calls Carl. And that name actually ends up sticking. He is referred to, and I say he, meaning the sculpture is referred to as Carl throughout the rest of the book and around the world. When she wakes up, her viral has gone, sorry, her video has gone viral. And she quickly realizes that the Carl she saw in New York City is actually one of dozens from around the world. And he might not be an artistic display. When she goes back and interacts with him, she realizes that he's interacting back with her and that perhaps he might even be otherworldly. So what is Carl? And more importantly, what does Carl want from April May and humans in general? Well, you're going to have to read An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green to discover all of Carl's secrets. All right, switching gears, we are going to move on to a historical romance book called The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. This book is set during the Depression era. It focuses on Alice Wright, who is living a very stifling life in England. She seems to do things that are not well received by her family, particularly by her traditional values mother. But she ends up meeting and very quickly marrying the American Bennett Van Cleve. They quickly move after their marriage to Kentucky, and she expects to just be wrapped up in this new fantasy and this fairy tale. But unfortunately, that very quickly dissolves when she realizes that her husband is actually not interested in her in nor out of the bedroom. Even worse is that her overbearing father-in-law makes it abundantly clear that he expects Alice to be a submissive and quiet wife, which is not at all what she wants to do. Luckily, she's given the chance to get out of this house by working as a traveling librarian with a pack of local women. She does join the Pack Horse Librarians of Kentucky, and these women take Alice in and quickly give her a new support system and really teach her what the true meaning of friendship is. And through this experience, she actually meets and falls for Fred, who is the owner of the property where the library sits and the horses that are used to transport the books. But Alice is married, albeit unhappily. And when kind of expressing this to her friend Marjorie, who is not only her friend, but also the leader of the librarians, Marjorie gives her some sage advice. I'm going to read you an excerpt of this right here. You don't have to play by their rules, Alice. You don't have to play by anyone's rules. Hell, if you wanted to pack up and head home to England, you could. There is always a way out of a situation. It might be ugly, might leave you feeling like the earth had gone and shifted under your feet, but you are never trapped, Alice. You hear me? There's always a way around. Based on the actual pack horse librarians of Kentucky that serve the people of the Appalachian Mountains from not just Kentucky, but all of Appalachia from the 1930s to the 1940s, this book is equal parts historical fiction and romance and all parts magic. You'll find yourself rooting for Alice and really hoping that she finds her happily ever after. And you'll also feel like this group of women that she surrounds herself with are your best friends as well. There are a number of ways that people express anger or they react to a setback. Some people might yell loudly. Some people might listen to really aggressive music. Some people might hit something like a pillow or a wall. Some people might take a more creative approach to let off some steam. In Kevin Wilson's Nothing to See Here, 10-year-old twins Bessie and Roland burst into flames, literally. Anytime that they get agitated, they just combust into flames. It doesn't cause any injury to them, but it does cause serious harm to other people. Literally, they can also catch on fire and be hurt by it, as well as property. Madison is Roland and Bessie's new stepmom, and she has no clue how to deal with this or these kids. So she reaches out to her boarding school roommate, Lillian, and asks Lillian if she wants to take a job as their caregiver. Lillian kind of doesn't have much going on, is kind of feeling like she's at a real low spot in her life, and she realizes she's got to take this job for the money, but also because she has no other options. Unfortunately, she doesn't know the first thing about caring for kids, especially kids who have such particular needs. Luckily, though, she does know how to work a fire extinguisher. More importantly, though, she immediately recognizes that these kids have some trauma and she tries to connect with them on a deeper level. I'm going to read you an excerpt from this book that kind of shows her connecting to these kids. You have to trust me that I'm going to take care of you. It's going to be weird, okay? I'm going to make you angry sometimes, but I'll take care of you. It's what I'm going to do. We catch on fire, Bessie told me. I know, I said. It's okay. We just go with you? She asked, and I nodded, exhausted. We'll go with you, they both said at the same time. We don't have that much stuff to bring, the boy informed me. He had stripes buzzed into the sides of his hair, and I was shocked to realize that their hair was unsinged. I don't know why, with these demon children bursting into flames right in front of me, their bad haircuts remaining intact was the magic that fully amazed me. But that's how it works, I think. The big thing is so ridiculous that you absorb only the smaller miracles. So while you're reading this book, Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson, you're knowing that these kids are going to burst into flames, but you're still going to be caught off guard by it. But even bigger than that, you're going to be also caught off guard by the feeling that you get in your heart when you see these little fireballs and their unique nanny. Lenny is a 17-year-old girl living in the terminal ward of a hospital, and Margot is an 83-year-old woman living in the ward next door to Lenny. Neither of them has much time left to live, but they both still have a lot of living left to do. This is the 100 Years of Lenny and Margot by Marianne Cronin. Lenny first spots Margot doing something strange. I'm going to read that excerpt to you right now. When I made it back to my bed, something caught my eye. Beside the nurse's station desk, the recycling trolley was awaiting the return of Paul the porter. It's a big wheeled bin. Paul's trolley is not something usually I would find interest in. But the interesting thing about it was that there was an elderly lady who was hanging halfway out of the bin, rustling through its papery contents with both hands, her small purple slippered feet barely touching the floor. Seeming to have found whatever it was she was looking for, the old lady straightened up, her gray hair fluffy from the effort. She slipped an envelope into the pocket of her purple dressing gown. The door to the office made a clunk as someone pulled on the handle. Nurse Jackie and Paul were coming out. The old lady caught my eye. I got the feeling she didn't want to be seen doing what she had just done. I made a yelping sound. They stared at me. I didn't want them to take their eyes off me as behind them, the purple lady climbed down from the edge of the bin and began her extremely slow getaway. At the end of the corridor, the old lady stopped and turned. Then she caught my eye and she winked. This common act of rebellion is what initially bonds these two very different, unlikely friends. But they actually end up officially meeting in a hospital art class a couple days after this interaction, and they just form an instant connection, especially when they realize that between the two of them, they have lived 100 years. They both know firsthand that life is very short. They decide to celebrate this achievement of living a combined century by painting 100 paintings, one for each year of their lives. And through those paintings, they are going to represent a story that they have experienced, something that they've been through. These painting and stories help us get to know who they are, but even more, it tells us who they were. It makes them more than just characters who are on the path of death. I really recommend that you have some tissues nearby while you read the 100 Years of Lenny and Margot, because it's beautiful and tragic, and I guarantee you're gonna cry. Next up, we have All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. The brain is locked in total darkness, of course, children, says the voice. It floats in a clear liquid inside the skull, never in the light. And yet the world it constructs in the mind is full of light. It brims with color and movement. So how, children, does the brain, which lives without a spark of light, build for us a world full of light. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr is a work of historical fiction set in both Germany and France during World War II. It focuses on two different characters. First, we see Marie Laure, who is a blind French girl who is fleeing Paris with her father as the Germans are advancing upon the city. Her father works as the master of locks at the Museum of Natural History. This museum is well known around the world in the book for housing a very expensive and very cursed jewel known as the Sea of Flames. Marie Laure and her father end up in Saint Malo to live with her great uncle in a house by the sea. She's unaware that her father has actually been assigned by the Museum of Natural History to help hide the jewel. With him, he has what might be the real jewel or might be one of the many replicas that was made to throw off the Germans who will stop at nothing to get the real one. And even her father doesn't know if the one he has is one of the replicas or the real one. And we as the audience don't know that either. Meanwhile, at the same time in Germany, we see an orphan young boy. His name is Werner Fenning. And one of the first things that he partakes in is the discovery of an illegal radio in Germany. And he and his sister, again, are orphans. So for them to find this radio is kind of like a treasure. So they definitely take it in, and Werner takes it upon himself to learn how to fix this radio. And it exposes them to news and stories that they otherwise wouldn't have known. It also leads to a passion within him of building and fixing radios, and he becomes so good at it that he gets the attention of German military leadership, and he is enlisted at a pretty young age as a teenager, really young teenager, to use his radio skills to track down the resistance. The book alternates focus from Marie Laure to Werner, and we see how they're experiencing the same war in very different manners and very different outcomes too. But ultimately, they come together to find the light in the world that they otherwise may not have seen. Pun on the title intended. So follow along on their journey and see how they come together in All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know. Come and see me in the library.